CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang is joining us now with more from the White House. Weijia, good to see you. So what more can you tell us about this deal, and what's been the reaction from Congress?
Well, I think the most important thing here to remember is that it was struck before this recent wave of violence erupted. And since then, Democrats have continued to support their concern over the timing now because, of course, we continue to see what's happening there. And many lawmakers have issued statements to say that, to move forward with this deal would be, quote, appalling, to use the word that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar used, without strings attached, without some agreement from Israel to commit to a ceasefire of some sort. And so there is a lot of worry that if this deal moves forward as scheduled, that it will send a signal that the escalations are somehow okay, because the U.S. would be selling these precision-guided weapons to Israel. So far, the White House is not commenting. That's also in part because legally they cannot. But certainly the pressure is on for them to do something or to consider something like withholding military aid from Israel.
Different topic. President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden have released their tax returns for 2020. The press release accompanying the returns included a wee bit of a dig at former President Donald Trump, saying that the Bidens are quote, continuing an almost uninterrupted tradition. So how much did the Bidens make? How much did they pay in taxes? And, President Biden typically avoids any mentions of the previous administration. So why the subtle jab?
Well, this is something that has defined the former president's term here, right? Because during his entire time in office, Democrats were trying to get a look at his tax returns, because it's not just about the income, it's about where that money was going and how it was tied up. But as for the Bidens, they made more than $600,000 in income last year. They paid more than $157,000 in taxes and donated more than $30,000 to charity. Now, as you mentioned, presidents are not required by law to reveal this information, but it has been a long-standing tradition that former President Trump broke when he refused to share his. Of course, that's still tied up in court as lawmakers and other parties are trying to get an idea of what's in those returns, not only for what I mentioned earlier about where the money was going, how much he made, but because, this is part of Mr. Trump's brand, that he would always be the best deal maker in chief. He sold this to the American people as part of his campaign. And so to not be able to see those actual figures to this day, many have called hypocritical.
All right, so let's talk about something else, Weijia, that a lot of people are focused on, a police reform package. And the president has expressed that he wants the bill on his desk by next Tuesday. That is the one-year anniversary of George Floyd's death. So how close are we? How close is this country to achieving that?
So even though the president has set that very informal deadline, lawmakers on both sides have said, look, we don't operate by a deadline that the president sets. We operate based on what sort of compromise we can find on police reform. And even though it sounds like they are getting closer, and the key lawmakers are meeting again today, Senator Tim Scott, Representative Karen Bass are meeting to try to find some common ground, it seems like they are still held up on qualified immunity, which in effect provides a shield to certain police officers from getting in trouble for things that they could do while in the field, from facing lawsuits. And so, Republicans have made very clear that they don't want to budge on this, but Democrats have argued time and time again that it's time to remove those protections so the consequences are greater for behavior in the field. So we will see what sort of progress they can make, but it's really unlikely that they're going to reach any sort of definitive bill by the 25th, which is Floyd's anniversary, which is next week.
President Biden
I should say
is
the
heading to Michigan
anniversary
today.
of George Floyd's murder. to be clear. I should say the anniversary of George Floyd's murders next week.
Weijia, President Biden is heading to Dearborn, Michigan today. He's making the trip as part of his American Jobs tour, and he'll be touring a Ford manufacturing facility. But it's important to note that the area is home to the nation's highest Arab American population, and Dearborn specifically has seen rallies recently in support of the Palestinians. What should we expect from this trip?
Well, I think regardless of where the president goes in the coming days, he should expect to see some protesters. And we know they've already gathered in this area to express their concerns about the violence in Gaza. But he is going anyway. Of course, he travels with a great deal of security, and he will continue to sell his American Jobs plan by focusing on electric vehicles today because, the Ford F-150 is the highest selling U.S. product right behind the iPhone. And so the Ford plans to unveil its electric version tomorrow. And so ahead of that, the president is going there to talk about the importance of investing in electric vehicles, not only to create more jobs, but for the environment. So he will get a tour of that facility today and make remarks. And so I think, the timing makes a lot of sense because, again, this is going to be a really substantial announcement for Ford to show that they have now modernized and made their F-150 pickup truck electrified, and hoping that consumers will also get on board to hit those target goals that the administration has set to try to cut down emissions.
All right, Weijia Jiang for us at the White House. Weijia, always great to see you. Thank you.
You too. Thanks.
And we'll be following the president's visit to the Ford plant in Dearborn, Michigan. He will tour the facility before speaking to reporters. You can stream the president's remarks starting at around 1:40 p.m. right here on CBSN.